Right, so it is 11 o'clock. We'll get started. This is Trash Talk. My name is Tina, and down below we've got Julia with the lovely map in the background. Say hello, Julia.
Hello, guys.
So Julia is an ocean scientist, and you'll get to know her pretty well. I myself am total fraud. So I'm a nanotechnologist, and currently I'm working as a science communicator in the UWA Oceans Institute. I get to talk to ocean scientists of all sorts, including Julia. And at the Oceans Institute, we work together with different kinds of researchers to try and solve big challenges that affect our oceans, from climate change to the trash that we have in our seas and what we can do to try and solve these problems together. So this new web series is a kind of experiment for us. This is the first time that we're running it. We are hoping to run it every week at a similar time, so check in next week for a different scientist. We'll let Julia go. But basically, we're trying to find a way to connect with you now that we have the COVID situation. Normally, we'd bring you out on campus and you get to tour all of our labs and see us at work. But now what we're doing is we are streaming to you from the comfort of our laundry room and Julia's living room. We also have a competition that we're trying to launch. So this is a video comp where you'll get to make some content to put onto our YouTube page as well, to keep you busy in the school holidays and into term 2. But we'll talk about that at the very end. Obviously, you've come here to hear from Julia Reisser, who is a ocean trash expert. So Julia, would you like to introduce yourself and perhaps what you do?
Hello, Tina. Thank you for having me. It's great to be the first one of this interesting series. So I am an ocean scientist, and today we're going to be talking a bit about ocean trash or anything related to the oceans that you might be keen to hear about. So, yeah.
Perfect. So, Julia, what is your research focusing on?
So I started to studying the oceans back in 2002 in Brazil. I'm from Brazil, and I studied quite a few things like the ocean currents, how they move around. But in the last 10 years, since I moved to Australia, basically, I've been researching mostly the problem of rubbish in our oceans, which is pretty much plastic. So it's I am a plastic pollution expert. That would be the fancy name for it. And yeah, I look forward to have some questions from you guys.
Awesome. So we actually collected a few questions from the students at Willetton and Perth Village School before this chat. And the big question that pretty much everyone wants to know is how much rubbish is in the ocean?
Yeah. So it's a very hard job for us to quantify exactly how much rubbish is there, but the best guess is around 200 million tons of rubbish. And at least 80% of it is plastics. And unfortunately, the situation is not getting good yet. So every year we are adding about 15 million tons of plastic more into what's already there. And just to give an idea, that's about like 2 trash trucks full of plastic being dumped into our oceans per minute. So every minute you have 2 trucks going there and just dumping all this plastic into there. So it is a situation that we need to somehow change soon.
So you did say it was mostly plastic that is in the ocean. I guess that means that there is a balance of that is something else as well.
Yeah, so we also find other types of trash, like let's say aluminum cans of beer that people sometimes go and drink close to the beach and leave it there. Very close to source, you can find a little bit of paper as well. So it's basically, if you look your trash at home, and you see that there are different materials there, and so we find a bit of other things too. But the problem with plastic is that it never disappears, it never biodegrades, so it does accumulate and stay there. So over time, we end up having far much more plastics than other materials like paper, for instance.
Just going back, I guess, to the plastic, do you have an idea of where most of the plastic comes from? Is it mostly just household trash, or are there other sources as well?
So most of the plastic actually comes from land, so basically from our cities. And that's because every year we're producing a massive amount of plastics. And we are managing to recycle and reuse only about 9% of it. So what it means is that the vast majority of this plastic rubbish that we're producing, it either gonna be burned or it's still here on Earth, every piece of plastic that we produce. And unfortunately, our oceans are downhill from everywhere. So it doesn't matter where on land you are, the ocean's gonna be down from you. So over time, that all that rubbish that we didn't recycle or didn't manage properly is gonna flush into our oceans. So that's the main source of plastics that we see in the oceans. When I go to offshore areas in the middle of the oceans, then you start to also see lots of plastic rubbish from fishing activities. We fish quite a lot in the ocean, and the fishing nets that we use, they are made of plastics. So they also accumulate and stay in the ocean forever. And in some areas of our oceans, we find lots of fishing nets, unfortunately, as well.
Well, we've got a question actually that's just come in from the chat log, as curated by Rob, our invisible ocean garbage gremlin. Here we go. So we have got a question from Megan Grace. I don't know who you are, Megan, but this is a great question. Is there anything that can be done to stop so much damage? Great question, a big question, I think.
Yes, I think there is heaps that can be done because the problem comes from land and from where we are. Mm-hmm. And I think we should really remember that us, every person on Earth, we play a huge role in what's happening on Earth, because we are, number one, the consumers, and number one, the citizens. So every time that you go to the supermarket or you go to buy something, you're acting like a consumer, and the things you choose to buy, you kind of investing on that business. So if you don't want so much packaging, so much wrap, you pretty much choose the other products that don't have so much, or you buy a reusable coffee cup. So you're helping those businesses that are using reusable contents to get more profitable. And as a citizen, once you are old enough, you vote. So when you go there and you vote for a politician, make sure that you're voting to those politicians that care about the environment, because the plastic problem, it comes from one single fact, which is that we're using too much fossil fuels. So every year we're pumping lots of fossil fuels from the ground, and we're using it for energy, which is creating like the climate change problem. And we're also using for materials, which is the plastic. 99.9% of our plastics made of fossil fuels. So we need to be listening to those politicians that are keen to solve that, to try to make us less reliable on fossil fuels, so we can move into a future that's more sustainable, both from a climate perspective, but also from a plastic pollution perspective. So I think it's very important to realize those roles we have. And in the everyday, is always about thinking about your everyday life. Look at your rubbish bin. Is there any rubbish there that you could have avoided and not produced? And little things like that. Make sure you have a compost as well, so you don't put your organic waste in the bin, but you can feed worms, or you can build a compost. So there are lots of things we can do on an individual level, but also as a community.
Absolutely. So you mentioned a couple of things that we can do in terms of the choices that we make in our everyday lives, which I think is really important. From whether or not you choose to drink out of one of these, perhaps rather than a non-reusable coffee cup, although these days, of course, the situation is a little bit different. All the way down to taking perhaps some political and social actions to help take charge of our society. We have a question that's just come in from Macaron Z about what is currently being done to get rid of plastics in the ocean. I think they mean more of a community and global scale there.
Yeah. I feel that the plastic finally is a hot topic now. When I started studying plastic back in 2010, nobody knew about the problem, but now I do see businesses trying to find better packaging solutions and moving into more reusable things where you can actually bring your containers to a shopping and doing those things. So there is lots happening on the main solution, which actually producing less rubbish. So then there is less ending up in our forests, in our deserts, and also in our oceans. And but also we have what I like to call the legacy pollution. So even if tomorrow everybody stops to produce plastic or generate plastic waste, we still have some plastic in our environment. So there are lots of people doing cleanups, and you as a community, you can join beach cleanups, and it's great because you can clean up your environment, and you also can learn more about what is the common items you find there, and be more aware of where the issue is, so we can, be more creative with those solutions. So I would say now I see lots of engagements on both, on those both things. One of them is stopping the source of the problem, which is this plastic waste, and two, cleaning up what's already out there.
It's interesting. So obviously we can't do that right now because of the social distancing, but when things are open again, we're allowed back outdoors again. Please do try and clean up the beaches. You mentioned legacy plastic and how long it takes to degrade. We've actually got a number of questions around the life cycle of the degradation of plastic once it's in the environment. So going way back, we've got from Nicholas, does aluminium degrade faster than plastic? So this is around, I guess, the speed of decomposition. But then a range of questions around what happens after plastic degrades. What do we know about microplastics, and can we ever revert plastic back to the original components?
Yeah. Should I answer the aluminium first?
Yeah, let's start with the aluminium.
Yeah. So the aluminium is also a very durable material, but it has a very, very big difference between aluminium and plastic. The difference is that you can make very profitable business with recycling aluminium. So what it means is that it's very rare that we get aluminium going into the oceans because it's profitable to recycle that. So we have a massive high rate of the amount of aluminiums all the waste that we produce, I think is 90%, or you guys can Google and see if I'm right. But it's very high percentage. So what it means is once we produce an aluminium, it will stay within the economy. So the aluminium economy is far much more circular, so that those materials stay there. So it doesn't leak much. Now, the plastic, as I said, is very small percentage, between 5 and 9% that gets recycled. And just like aluminium, it's a very durable material. So once the plastic gets into the environment, in our oceans, it's not going to disappear. All the plastic we've produced is still on Earth. And what it happens, which is quite sad, is that it breaks up into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces.
So that'll be the microplastics.
Yes, when they are the size of a sand grain, so about 5 millimeters, like very tiny, we start to call them microplastics. And they are very similar to the food of lots of fish and lots of animals that live in the ocean. So they end up ingesting lots of those microplastics. And we are quite concerned about the effects of those microplastics into our marine animals.
Mm-hmm. But that's, I guess, a physical process, breaking it down from a bulk plastic, like a cup or a container, into a grain of sand. But is there a chemical breakdown that can happen as well? We've got a few questions around reverting it back to the original starting materials. For example, Xinhua Zukov claims that actually, yes, you can turn plastic back into the oil that it came from. Scientists, please verify.
That's a very good question. So you guys know lots about it. Yes. So when it comes to plastics, there are different types of recycling. The most common one is called mechanical recycling, which means you take your plastic rubbish and you wash it down, and then you mechanically melt it, basically, and do another cup. That's very hard to do because the plastic is dirty. So the maximum you can do is, like, let's say you have a plastic bottle and it's going to become a carpet. But it's very hard to mechanically transform a bottle back into a bottle because there's too much dirt on it, and then it's not food grade. You cannot, put food into that plastic. But more recently, we've been doing lots of research and development in what's called chemical recycling. And what chemical recycling is that you take the plastic, which is called polymer, and you use enzymes and catalysts that break down the polymer into their monomers. And with that, you pretty much can get rid of the dirt and, make one bottle becomes a bottle again. So it's quite exciting. It's still the issue about those technologies is that it's very, very hard to compete with cheap fossil fuel. It's similar to clean energy and fossil fuel. We kind of for most of those things we have the technology, but to make a bottle out of plastic waste, it's more expensive than to just pump fossil fuel from the ground and make a virgin plastic bottle. So that's what we're facing at the moment, is more the economics of making it profitable for business to scale than anything else. But I'm very passionate about those technologies. And yes, and you also can turn a plastic bottle into oil, and that's called pyrolysis, which is a type of chemical recycling. Which
there you go.
That again, you can, you make the bottle becomes oil, and then you can use the oil for energy, or you can use part of it to make a new bottle. So it's quite exciting. Yeah.
So Chinquazukov definitely right. You can turn it back into oil.
Yes, he's right. And it's called pyrolysis, the process.
I feel ashamed because I studied as a chemical engineer. I should know this, but this is absolutely news to me. I am learning this for the very first time. But I want to talk a bit more about your particular research, because we talked a lot about, I guess, the processing of plastic and recycling. Is that the focus of your research, or are you more focused on the oceans?
Yeah, so at the moment I have 3 hats, so I'm quite busy. So I have a job at Oceans Institute, which is pretty much continuing the work that I've been doing for more than 10 years now, which is understanding ocean plastics. So where is the plastic that we find in the ocean coming from? How can we stop it? And also the impacts, how many animals are dying? Is it just the physical impact of the plastic, or is the plastic contaminating the fish with chemicals? So all those things, I'm employed by the UWA Oceans Institute, and together with the scientists from that institute, we like learning more about the ocean plastic problem. But I'm also very passionate about the startups and coming up with innovative businesses that can actually try to disrupt that industry and solve the things through the business sides. And so I'm also doing an MBA, which is a Master of Business Administration, UWA too. So I'm a student again. And I also have a startup developing biomaterials. So instead of making plastic out of fossil fuels, what my team is trying to do is to make it out of seaweed. So that's other thing that I'm doing as well, which is quite new and exciting.
Okay, so earlier today, Julia and I were messing around, and I realized that I've got a fancy similar concept just on my desk, which is this. You might have seen it at home as well. It is a bio cup, which claims to be a better alternative to plastic. I think it's got a similar story, made from some kind of organic plant-based material. Is that right?
Yeah, so that cup you have there is a type of bioplastic called PLA. And if I'm not wrong, it's made of corn, that one. And I do like those cups, but what we need to realize when you introduce new materials to the system is that you need to have a solution for that. And so that startup that does that cup that you show, the bio cup, it's very good for like cafes. Like I live in Cottesloe, and there are some cafes that you go there, and now they're plastic when they cannot use reusables, which is far much better. They use this one, and then they put in a bin together with the organic waste, and it's like a private waste management. So that startup has trucks that go to the cafe, pick up the bioplastics and the organic waste, and they bring that to an industrial compost that makes compost out of the plastic and also the organic waste. And that's great because it mitigates both the plastic pollution problem, but also the climate change problem. Because when we dump organic waste on landfills, it produces methane, and that's one of the main causes of climate change. So I find it very cool when you have that closed system. But you do need to have that composting service going alongside using those plastics. Because if you just put in your normal bin at home, it's gonna end up in the landfill, and in the landfill, that cup is not gonna biodegrade. It needs high temperature industrial compost.
Oh no, Julia. You're absolutely dashing my dreams and hopes, because I know for a fact that 99% of the time I take this home, which means that I dispose of it at home in my normal green bin with the red lid, which means that this makes its way back into the ocean, which segues into a range of questions we have around the oceans and plastic in, which is your focus of your research. We have a lot of questions around which ocean is the most polluted, and we've got a few different bets going. I bet it's the Mediterranean, but which one is it? Which one is it, Julia?
The Mediterranean, it's incredible. These people know lots about plastic.
It is the Mediterranean, fantastic.
It is, so he got right, yes. Because
congratulations, lizard overlord.
Yeah, I mean, these people have been studying lots. They could come and work with us at the Oceans Institute. So the Mediterranean Sea is quite closed, and there is lots of population around it. So we do find quite a lot of plastic. We find plastic at the sea surface of the Mediterranean, at the bottom, the water column, and the beach. So it is an area that's quite polluted. But talking about the big oceans, because like the Mediterranean is kind of closed, then at the moment we think that the North Pacific is quite bad. There is quite lots of plastics in the North Pacific. So I would claim that that would be the one that you have the highest amount of plastic.
So a bit of geography for me, an ex-chemical engineer. Where is the North Pacific? I kind of know where the Mediterranean is, but I'm less good about the oceans. So the North Pacific, that's west coast of America?
Yeah. Can you see the map in the background?
I can see your map, absolutely. Your glorious full wall map there.
Yeah, so you see there South America, where I'm from, which is
here. Brazil.
Yes, and then we have US, so that's the North Pacific, this area here.
Is that where the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is, or is that somewhere else?
Yeah, so the can you see very well? Yes, okay. So what we call the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is here, where I'm pointing, which is between California and Hawaii. So there is an area here. Then I've been there quite a few times. One time we brought 30 boats to the area to really map it. And I also went with a C-130 aircraft, which is a very interesting kind of army-style aircraft. That we went there to look very from above and count the fishing nets. That there is lots of fishing nets in the area.
Fantastic. So you've done a lot of traveling, it sounds like.
Yes. It was one of the reasons why I decided to become an oceanographer is that I really like to explore areas and know new places. And I've been lucky enough to get quite a few jobs on going in lots of amazing places, around the world. So that's for people that are curious and like science. I highly recommend becoming an ocean scientist.
I have to ask this. What's like the coolest place you've ever been? What's like the weirdest place you've ever been?
I think in terms of the weirdest place, I would say that those oceanic garbage patches are quite different, particularly because you look at the ocean and it's like blue and beautiful, and you're like, where is the garbage patch? There is no rubbish here. But we put some sampling devices in the water, which is a net that you tow the net for like half an hour. And then you take water out of the water, and there is 180 times more plastic than life on the surface of those areas. And for me, that was very weird, because when you go there, you just look at the ocean and things are kind of underwater. You're like, it's so beautiful, so remote. But the moment that you capture that water that's a bit underwater, you see there's so much plastic than life. So that was basically, I think, a very weird place to go. But in terms of beautiful places, before I became a trash expert, I used to study things related to climate change. And I was a physical oceanographer, which is called like you study the water. And I used to go to Antarctica. And for me, it was like beautiful, particularly when I camped. I camped in an island called Elephant Island, and working with an animal called elephant seals, which are massive. And my job was to glue on the head of the animal. Well, it's like a tracker that measures the temperature of the ocean and things. So the seal kind of swims around and sends us data about how the temperature of the ocean is going, how much is warming because of climate change and things like
So
that.
you're telling me you used to be a professional elephant seal wrestler?
Pretty much. Yes. And
Okay.
it's very hard work to grab them. It's, yeah, we had a few veterinarians with us, but it was a very nice adventure. Yes.
All right, so there's a few more questions coming through. Actually, 2 suggestions of interesting engineering innovations to do with the oceans. I'll go with the first one first. Nicholas Burijanto, why don't we start using sea grapes instead of bubble wrap? So first of all, what are sea grapes? I have no idea.
What sea grape? What do you think is sea grape? I don't know as well. I have to Google.
I have no idea. Sea grape. Is it a delicious thing? Is it one of those things that's like a string with loads of bubbles on? Nicholas, we'll come back to you. Can you confirm what a sea grape is first and foremost?
Caulerpa. Okay. I found out. Find it. Caulerpa. All right. I know the name, the scientific name. So
she knows the scientific name, not the common person name. How typical.
Yes, because I'm still learning English. I speak Portuguese most of the time. So.
Okay. Is it different?
But it's a green algae called Caulerpa. So I guess like if you just take that raw, which seems that some people eat, which is cool. I find it a very nice seaweed. I think it wouldn't like, it's too jelly and stuff, but through my startup, we're trying to do that. We're trying to farm seaweed, which takes lots of carbon out of the environment. So it kind of mitigates climate change. And then we use that, but you need to do some technological change on the material and then use that for packaging. So it's kind of a carbon negative packaging. So I am with, what's his name?
Nicholas Burijanto.
Nicholas, I am with you. Then I think we should be using the seaweed to do styrofoam and all the types of plastics, and start using fossil fuel to make our materials.
But just to clarify, you're going to put it through a chemical process rather than just taking it and using it directly as bubble wrap. But great idea.
Yes, and there are a few startups already starting doing it. They do mostly with a seaweed that's called kelp. Mm-hmm. And I think the Oceans Institute should invite Thomas to talk here about his work with the kelps, we have a very good scientist that works with seaweed called Thomas. And the kelp, it produces something called alginate that can be used to make things like straws. So there are 2 ladies in New York that have a startup called Lolyware, and they make a straw that you can use like a few times, and then you can eat it at the end. It's like a sushi straw.
Delicious.
And that is lots of, but there are different processes that you can do also other types of bioplastics. But this one with alginate is quite cool.
So definitely you can turn seaweeds into bubble wrap. Good to know. There's another question coming through more around cleaning up the oceans, and this is quite an interesting one. Someone called Pepe has asked, are fishing nets good for catching rubbish? So you mentioned that fishing lines do get thrown away into the ocean and end up in the pile. Could we instead perhaps use them to try and clear up the rubbish?
Yes, the problem of the fishing nets is that they are made to kill, right? So the problem is when you go to the ocean, you have plastics, but you also have fish and lots of marine life. So if you try to clean up just like trawling with a net, then you're gonna get the plastic, but you get everything. You get the dolphins, you get the fish and everything. So unfortunately, if you just fish for plastic, you get lots of what scientists call bycatch. So we would get lots of stuff that we don't want to get out of the water So that's not a good method, I would say, to just throw fish for plastics. But having said that, like there are some fishermen in the Mediterranean that they fish for fish, right? So they get seafood for us, and they are getting lots of plastic in their nets, not because they're fishing for plastic, but it comes lots. So they are kind of cleaning up as they fish. So we do get some plastic removed this way. But if your objective is to actually clean up oceans, then you need to look at other types of technologies. And I used to work for a guy called Boyenslat, and that's a Dutch NGO called the Ocean Cleanup. And you guys could check it out, their website. And
I don't know which one this is. This is the one with the trawler and the U-shaped net behind it that's open at the bottom, isn't it?
So there is like a sausage, is like a pipe that's floating around, and that's how they clean up the oceanic areas. And now they have some systems to also put on the river mouths. And when I was there, we mapped how much rubbish is coming from different rivers. And now they're putting these machines on the river mouths that kind of create like a quick fix for the problem, because it's going to take time for us to fix out the waste management and not use fossil fuel anymore and things like that. So that's kind of a quick fix for the problem. But I suggest you guys to check it out, their website. They are very, very good on outreach, and it looks very cool. You can see the engineering solutions there.
So engineering solutions, actually going back a little bit, you said that obviously there are a lot of there are a lot of products appearing on the market and startups that are hopping up. But one of the, I guess, key stumbling blocks is not so much the technology as it is the economic viability of these solutions. And you've done a lot of work actually on the economic side of this issue and also the solutions that we can come up with. I was wondering if you could talk about the importance of the industry, particularly in our region, in Australia, but also in Asia.
Yes, I'm actually writing a scientific paper at the moment to publish that is about the importance. Like, if we want to have cleaner oceans, we need to learn how to cooperate. Like, the countries need to work with each other. Because we have this idea that most of the rubbish going to the oceans is from the poor countries. But if you look at ourselves, like in Australia, we are very good at collecting. Like, we have the truck that come to my house and pick up the rubbish. But then what we do, we just like pack it up and then we export to other countries. Like at the moment, Indonesia is a big one that receives our own waste. And they need help there. They need help there to improve the standards of their recycling operations. So I really believe that a big part of solving this problem is coming together and investing more in the infrastructure necessary to deal with rubbish. We cannot just use lots of plastic and then there is no truck that comes to pick up your waste in Indonesia. Or in the case of Australia, we just collect it, but then we don't have the recycling plant. So I think we need to come together and find ways to invest on that infrastructure. And I think a big part of creating that incentive to invest on that infrastructure perhaps is to make fossil fuel a little bit more expensive. And that would help us make recycling more profitable and also clean energy more attractive. So it all comes down to valuing, like fossil fuel is such an important resource, is very valuable for us. We still need it, but we should put a value on it. Like at the moment, it's too cheap. So we just, making plastic crap out of it. So if we put a bit of a carbon price, make it a little bit more expensive, then, the entrepreneurs is going to start to do more recycling because, you can make a sustainable business out of it. So I think, yes, it's important to also improve the technology, but the truth is there is enough technology already for us to be implementing that technology on the ground. We just need to find a way to make it profitable so the investors and the businessmen actually start to invest on that infrastructure to collect the waste and recycle it.
Right, so the technology exists. Let's put a value around that so we can make this technology worth it on a larger scale.
That's
Fantastic.
right.
This leads into a really big question from Tamika R, probably the biggest question we've had so far. How to regulate plastic pollution at international levels. Ocean Plastics Charter was signed to reduce plastic pollution by 2030, but didn't refer to regulation of fishing tools or plastic production. So now moving away from economics and technology into the regulation side.
Yes. You say fishing or you packaging at the end of the question?
Production, plastic production.
Okay, yes.
Fishing tools and
Yes,
production.
yes. I think if you look at this problem really like high level, we have the plastic producers, which produce lots of plastic, commonly on the rich countries, and then we ship it, and then it goes to poor countries that the government have to deal with that waste management, and they don't have the money to put that infrastructure in place, and then the business people don't want to put money because it's not profitable, so we end up having no infrastructure to deal with the rubbish. So I really believe that one type of legislation that can really help is called extended producer responsibility. And that means that if I am a business that are producing plastics or using plastic to bottle my water or whatever it is, I am also like the responsibility of the business using the plastic. It doesn't end up when the bottle gets in your hands, right? So right now the way that the legislation works is if I sell plastic bottles, the moment you buy the bottle, if you end up in the beach, is your fault. Is the fault of the person that throw in the ground.
So I didn't put this in the right place, therefore it's on me.
It is your fault. Yes, exactly. But I think we need to put a bit of the responsibility on the producer too. So that producer can still make a profit out of selling plastic bottles, but a bit of their revenue is used to create that infrastructure so the bottle end up recycled instead of at the beach. So I would recommend people to Googling about, it's called extended producer responsibility policies. We're doing quite good work on that in Europe, and but there is more to be done. And we should really do that with packaging. And I also think we should do with fishing nets. So the fishermen have an incentive to bring the nets back to the port and recycle the nets instead of just losing it. Or actually, there is no place to put the fishing nets at the moment. So.
Wonderful. Just going back to your own personal work that you're doing, I understand that recently you've been doing a lot of work in Indonesia. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that particular adventure.
Yes, yes. So recently I've done quite a bit of work in Indonesia. My previous job, I used to work for Mindaru Foundation, which is based here in Perth. And part of my work was to help the Jakarta people, which is a big city in Java, in Indonesia, to better understand their river cleanup operations. Like they have lots of those technologies on the river that capture plastics. And together with them, we've done what's called a GIS. So it's basically like a map. So we understand where they're getting those rubbish on the river. And what their work really helped was because they have lots of machines on the river, and sometimes the machine is not capturing no rubbish, and then another machine is full. So we know that there is a problem in between those two machines on the river. So we can talk with the communities and see why they're losing so much plastics. And commonly it's because there is no truck coming to pick up their waste. And then more recently, since I joined UWA Oceans Institute, we've been doing some work in Surabaya, which is a very big port in Indonesia that is receiving lots of waste from UK, Australia, and Germany, and Japan. And so there is lots of rubbish there. And I learned so much from the people in there. And their work I'm doing in collaboration with an NGO called Common Seas. And their main mission in there is very cool. It's they are trying to solve the problem of single-use diapers, the nappies of the babies. We find lots of them on the river. So we're working with the ladies there and creating ladies-led businesses where they actually making practical, reusable nappies. And they actually liking it because it's relatively practical to use. It's cheaper as well. So they save money doing that. And it's healthier. Sorry?
What is it made out of?
We're making it out of cotton,
Oh,
but in the middle you use some synthetic material similar to like Gore-Tex, when you have those adventure um, jackets that stop the wind.
oh, the puffy jackets.
Yeah, it's called the Gore-Tex, so it's kind of it's a synthetic material that's still breathable. So the babies are really liking it because it gives less hash on the baby as well, because the single-use nappies have lots of chemicals that interact with the skin of the baby. So it's going very well. The ladies are producing lots of it, and that's another website that you could check it out. It's called Common Seas, and they're doing very good work there. And the Oceans Institute, we went there to help them set up this reusable nappy thing, also understand how the rubbish is moving on the rivers and finding the areas where we should be researching more about the problem. So it's been quite an interesting experience to be working in Indonesia. Yes.
How exciting. I'm sure we'll be able to email through some resources or to put them up in the description after today's event with all the different websites that you've already mentioned. We've kind of assumed in the course of this chat that obviously plastic pollution is a bad thing, but we haven't gone into some of the health implications of plastics. So there's a few questions coming in around that particular topic. This one's very niche, very specific. Nicholas asks, plastic and anchovies and the safety of eating. So I think this is back to microplastics and the journey that it makes through the food chain.
So the safety to who? Sorry?
Plastic and anchovies in particular, but let's generalize that to all fish in the sea, all things that we eat, and the safety of eating those things.
Yeah. So just starting from the fish perspective, so the plastic, right? When we make a plastic object, as I explained before, it breaks up into tiny pieces, and the issue is that those tiny pieces, it can have chemicals, pollutants, and some of them come from the plastic itself. So like the dyes, they are all chemicals that we add to the plastic, or flame retardants and things that we call persistent organic pollutants that can be bad for the health of any animal. And also, when the plastic gets into the water, they are what we call hydrophobic, which pretty much means that they act like a magnet to any oily pollutants. So imagine the plastic float in the ocean, the oily pollutants, they tend to float as well in the ocean. So you end up having some of those chemicals getting into that plastic. And then when the fish eats that piece of plastic, those pollutants that are on the plastic, it can go into the animal because of the pH of the stomach and things like that. The ocean scientists, they still busy to understand really, like, is it a huge concern or is it a small concern? So there's lots of like discussion among the different scientists. But yes, we've observed chemicals going from the plastic to the fish, and we eat fish, so we are part of that food chain, and that can affect human health as well. But I have to highlight that we don't have a very comprehensive model as well telling us how concerning that is. So we're still finding out like how much pollutants are end up in our seafood through plastic pollution, because there is lots of other sources of pollutants that go to the fish too. So, it can go from the, like, let's say I am very concerned with like the plastic that goes to the landfill. It kind of, all these chemicals, it kind of melts down from the plastic, and then it goes to our groundwater, and then that groundwater flushes into river or the ocean. So it can also end up in our seafood this way, right? So you have the plasticizers, which is these pollutants on the plastic, in the landfill, goes to the groundwater, then we drink that water, or it can go to the ocean, and then the fish breathes the water and end up on the fish. So there are many ways that it's affecting us. Yeah. So
you did say at the beginning that basically the ocean is downstream from everything, so it all ends up back in the sea one way or the other, whether that's through a garbage truck or through the water table.
yes,
But it's a very thing to talk about. But you did outline a number of, I think, really useful solutions. So hopefully we'll be able to find a way together to try and solve this problem as a globe or as a local community or
Yes.
individually as well.
And I think talking about the chemicals, one thing that we can realize is maybe we should realize that the plastic interacts with the environment and the plastic interacts with our food, and you can actually make plastic that's safer for us, because the issue is mostly on the chemicals that we mix with the plastic. And if I am producing food inside a plastic container, I don't need to tell my government which chemicals I'm using to make the plastic more flexible or colorful. So maybe we need a bit of regulation to make sure that any chemical that we add into our packaging, that it's safe to human health. So, humans are being affected by the chemicals in the plastic, actually more from what we get on the supermarket than from the seafood, because those chemicals can actually directly leak from the plastic container to our food or our drink. So I think that we need more legislation to make sure that any chemicals that we want to start to add in our packaging, before it's added in our packaging, we do some tests in the lab and make sure they are safe for us before we put on the market.
Fantastic. We're coming up to just 45 minutes now, so I think it's probably time to start wrapping things up. I would like to finish with a couple of silly fun questions. So these are the emergency questions when we run out of things to talk about. Well, we never actually ran out of topics. It was quite an interesting discussion all the way through. And thank you so much for the chat log, so full of fascinating questions. But Julia, what is the most seasick you've ever been on your travels?
So I am very lucky, actually. I don't get much seasick. It's a very personal thing. Some people are born with a better equilibrium, and I think they really know. Like, I was in the deck fishing for prawns, and there was a trawler, and the smell of the diesel and all those shrimp and seafood made me sick. But since then, I think my body got used to it, and I think that's why I love so much to be at sea, sailing or researching and all of that. And I did get very rough oceans. There was a trip that I've done from Fiji to Brisbane. No, actually it was Hobart. So Fiji to Hobart with the Southern Surveyor, which is a CSIRO boat, an old boat from CSIRO. And we got a cyclone, and it was like massive waves, and it was pretty scary. We were in the eye of this cyclone and just drifting, and our captain like pointing the boat to the right direction, so it was like 57 knots. We got up to 57 knots for those that know about wind. And yeah, it was quite a scary experience. At some point I had to like tight myself on the bed, because otherwise I would just smash on the floor. But I'm lucky I didn't get seasick.
We live very different lives, Julia. Quite an adventurer. I'm quite jealous. Look, I think we do have to wrap things up. If we didn't get to answer your questions, we'll be going back through the chat log, and we'll find a way for you to be able to interact with us again. Obviously, we're running this series into the future next week and hopefully the week after, until the end of our current situation. Next week we will be also running the first of our video competitions. So let me just go through the details for that to finish up. So competition theme this week is going to be turn trash into ocean science. I think that's quite fitting. So what we're going to ask is for you to go through your bin and pick out your rubbish and turn it into something cool relating to ocean science. So whether that's a scientifically accurate model of a penguin or an elephant seal with a tracker on the back, or maybe it's a cool machine that recycles plastic in some new and interesting way. We're going to ask you to film yourself explaining your awesome object for up to a minute, so 60 seconds max. Email it in, and then we're going to judge you out of your creativity, effort, and your understanding of science topics. The winners will be featured on this channel for next week's live stream, and there will be additional prizes on offer as well. We haven't decided what, but they're going to be cool. I think that's pretty much it for us. Julia, any final words to the lovely audience?
No, I would just thank you, Tina, and the UWA Oceans Institute, and all our audience for all the interesting questions and for starting this new initiative, which is quite cool. And I'll make sure to watch the ones coming up next. It's going to be exciting. So thank you for that.
Fantastic. When you're emailing in your videos, do make sure you do get your parental permissions. Otherwise, we'll not be able to show them. So you won't be featured, which is very sad. Just make sure you get that through to us. We'll be putting up links for that competition with more information and all the links that Julia mentioned in her lovely talk today as well. So make sure you check back in once this is no longer live. We'll put it back up as a recorded video. And thank you so much for the 60 plus people that joined us. I think we've peaked out at 68 audience members, which is fantastic. We hope you learned something. I actually learned a lot, so it was worth it for me. So we'll wave goodbye to everyone. See you.